Ender Lilies Quietest of the Nights is one of the games of all time. In a world of pretty hand-drawn Metroidvanias, this is definitely one of them. I'm well aware that this is far from the most topical game in the genre at the moment, but it is pretty easy to get footage for. Ender Lilies isn't quite great, just good. An above-average game with some nice highs and pretty meandering lows. Its significance to me is that it was my first real entry into the genre of Metroidvanias. The one I chose among many other games that shared its semi-niche status. And I'm not going to pretend it wasn't because of who made the soundtrack. Today I think it's still worth giving a try when it goes on sale. It's also got a sequel, which I haven't played much of, but I'll get to at some undefined time in the future. The game takes place in Land's End. We awake after the kingdom has been swept by the Rain of Death, spreading a blight across the land. Anyone left was mutated into monstrous forms, rendered nearly mindless by the affliction. Ender Lilies stars the titular Lily, so why is the title plural? We'll find out later. In contrast to the average Metroidvania protagonist, who kinda needs to be capable of throwing hands, Lily can't really do anything. Her most impressive physical feat by far is continuously running and climbing around the kingdom, wearing clothes that are definitely not suited for it. So that's where our second protagonist comes in, with his very fashionable set of plate armor. The Umbral Knight is our only means of attack for the very first section of the game. Our roster of grey friends will increase drastically as the game goes on, but for now, him and his 3-hit combo are all we have. If you've played a standard Metroidvania before, then you've probably experienced something similar to the gameplay of this game. The gimmick of Ender Lilies is that your combat moveset is fully customizable, kind of. You have a total of 6 skill slots, split into 2 sets, which you can fill from your pool of spirits. These come in 2 types, infinite use and not infinite use. Most spirits in this game have a limited number of uses before you have to sit down and let them recover. This essentially means that the time you have to explore or fight a boss with your full kit is limited, and I think it works better on one of these sides than the other. You're generally not fighting bosses for nearly as long as you would be exploring. So all limiting spirit uses does during boss fights is making sure you don't use them carelessly. With exploration on the other hand, I don't like feeling that I can only do so much before having to go to a bench. Limiting healing per bench is one thing, but limiting spirit uses makes the exploration feel somewhat hampered, like you're only allowed to do so much of it before the game hamstrings your moveset. Sure, you still have your infinite spirit and movement abilities, but I think part of the appeal of Metroidvanias is long exploration sessions where you look in every nook and cranny. Because if you like this genre of game, you are also a kleptomaniac. Alternatively though, the limited spirit use could be a way to emphasize Lily's own weakness. And if that's what the devs intended, you know what? I respect it. And for what it's worth, in my 2.5 hours of playing the sequel, the abilities are no longer limited. So, spirits, how do you get them? Well, we're going to kill them first. By taking their blight into herself, Lily has the ability to purify spirits, pacifying them, and letting you use them in combat. Mini-bosses provide limited-use spirits, while story bosses generally provide infinite ones. Later on, every story boss spirit also gets an ultimate. There are also relics, collectible equipment that take up a certain number of your limited slots. The effects are things like giving you more max HP, giving you more defense, doubling the size of your ult meter, things like that. Some of them also give you more spirit uses if you're hurting for them. There are also several relics that give you additional heals, which are limited and refill at benches. Truly, this is the Dark Souls of... You probably know how this goes already. Time your attacks, dodge enemy attacks, string together combos with your spirits to maximize damage windows or juggle lesser enemies. It's pretty standard stuff and it works fine. It gets the basic rhythm of combat down. You can equip 3 spirits per loadout, and you have 2 that you can switch between freely. This is pretty fun, and makes combat feel more dynamic. Enemies also have poise meters, but it's not tied to anything defensive, you just hit them and it goes down. I do have some problems with the combat however. Chief among them is the sound design, and how that affects the overall combat feel. A lot of the sounds in this game are very soft, oddly so. You would think that swinging this big hammer around would feel a bit more impactful. That's probably the most extreme example, but it generally applies to attacks in this game. It makes the combat feel more spongy than it might have felt with better sound effects. I also find the spirit selection just a bit lacking. Not the infinite ones, the other ones. There is some nice stuff in there though. There's two different kinds of parries, one being omnidirectional. These do provide extra mobility, potentially making travel easier but making you a little weaker in direct combat. This one places a ground AoE if cast on the ground, but a short circular AoE if cast in the air. This is a good start, but I would have liked to see some more depth in how these can alter your playstyle. Maybe some could have their own combos done by a repeat input. The boss spirits do get additional combo stages when you upgrade them, and I think that's pretty neat. I feel similarly about the relics. A lot of these are just plain stat increases. While things like that do have a place, there's a lack of more specialized ones that let you spec into more niche playstyles. As a side effect, it unfortunately also makes the exploration feel a little less interesting. But of course, this is a Metroidvania. Attacking is only half the puzzle. Mobility upgrades are instrumental to keeping you alive. Lily herself may be offenseless, but she is far from defenseless. Starting off, you'll only have a meager dive, but as the game goes on, you'll eventually get all of this shit. You also get this thing. It's a parry ring, allowing you to block an attack with a well-timed input. I thought this thing was pretty useless, but it turned out to be pretty fun to use, even if the dash gives you iframes. The knockback you take from it is also pretty fun to watch. Some Metroidvanias act as perfectly accurate depictions of some part of the world, and this one is no exception. Land's End is a very grey and very gloomy place. Makes sense, the quality of life isn't exactly the best around here.
Cause I live in a shithole!
The game takes place throughout the standard variety of areas, and there's the same pervading feeling of death and decay in all of them. And yet, most of them also feel very serene and still, but in a very stagnant way, like there's a layer of mold and dust covering the entire world. It's mostly grey, and if it's not grey, it's muted, which makes the few instances of brightness stand out even more. The art is definitely one of this game's strong suits. Every area in this game is just so beautiful. They capture the mood so perfectly. But as good as that is, I'd still say a lot of the atmosphere comes from the music. Without it, the game goes from just feeling cold and lifeless to still cold and lifeless, but with a tinge of what it had before. The area tracks in this game have a really strong presence. They rarely fall into the role of just being ambience. Most tracks have very distinct, sometimes intense and sorrowful melodies. If you want an area from a more popular game that captures this kind of feeling, boo. Exceptions are the Bulbel domain, because that place always sucked, and the Witch's Thicket, because I guess they're just chill like that. These also pair very well with the bench rooms. When you enter one, the music switches to a more trimmed down version with less instruments, toning the tension down. Overall, the environmental music is great. I love it. The boss music is more inconsistent, much like the bosses themselves. This game doesn't have a ton of boss fights, so none of them are really intended to be throwaways. Each one has 2 unique tracks for different phases, so it's more important for these to be good fights. And some of them are. Sigrid is a very solid starting boss with 2 great tracks to boot. Her sister is a fairly similar fight and isn't bad either. Ulv is my favorite boss in the game. He's very agile and melee focused, which ramps up in subsequent phases. But he's appropriately telegraphed. You know that one thing people say when they enjoy a boss fight in any action game? Yeah, that. His second phase music in particular is also really nice. He's pretty straightforward, as all the bosses in this game tend to be, but that's completely fine, as long as you make the moveset fun. Everyone else does alright except the two bottom tiers, Hoenir and Blighted Lord. Hoenir refuses to give me a good fight because Hoenir's a fucking pussy. He literally has one attack in phase 1 and ends the fight with a total of 4. He's also easily the most evasive boss in the game. Stay next to him for more than a second and he'll jump away. He also summons these guards while taking potshots at you, which aren't even interesting to fight, they just get in your way. In phase 2 onwards, he even gets a dedicated knockback attack. This guy just cannot stop running. I'm a small child, square up. Blighted Lord in a vacuum isn't horrible, but it's bottom tier because this is the final boss of the game. It's pretty important not to mess these up, at least make it mid. Hoenir and Blighted Lord are the only bosses in the game to spawn ads, which I would argue generally make boss fights worse if they're not tightly designed enough. Blighted Lord's choice of ad? Spitters, with homing projectiles. And you need to burst these down fast since they get summoned pretty quickly. But the rest of the moveset is just so boring. This hits one side of the arena, this one hits both sides of the arena. Run to the edge to dodge this explosion. And unless you're getting the true ending, that's the entire fight. Only in the true ending can you actually get the extra phase, which has this meteor rain attack, which is fine, but after that you're just doing the same thing again. It's a pretty dull fight, and I wanted to like it. Not just because it's the final boss, but its introduction is actually really cool. And it's also the most significant boss story-wise. Speaking of, Ender Lilies tells its story in a few ways. Most of the time, you're going to be looking at notes and watching flashback cutscenes after you kill a boss. That's a fine way to do it, knowing how dead the game tries to make its world seem. This is one of those times where the actual story has already happened, and we're just living in the aftermath. Many of the notes are accounts of various nameless inhabitants of Land's End, telling of how they attempted to handle the Blight. These can either be some guy whose job was to hang out in the Mega AIDS cave under the kingdom, or the king of the First Age, documenting his battle against a race known as the Ancients. Other than some post-boss cutscenes, this is really the only way they get to say anything to you. Through it all, you can piece together how the kingdom got to the way it is now. The events of the game all center around Fretia, the White Priestess of the Fount. A descendant of the Ancients, she has the power to purify the Blight. Elsewhere, a scholar named Phaedon is looking for a way to alleviate the effects of purification. He and his assistant Muriel, the third worst boss in the game, ventured into the Verboten domain to look for a solution. Using a blighted sample from the priestess, he created the Deathless Elixir, intended for people to ingest to combat blighted monsters. This allowed them to become undead and fight forever, but over time the side effects took their toll. The average soldier eventually started to catch on to the elixir's effects, judging by this one note where a guy remarks that he was not that different from the monsters he was fighting anymore. But nonetheless, many took the pact to become undead soldiers to defend the kingdom. Though the defense was successful, it took a grave toll on Fretia, making her bedridden. She refused to birth a successor, so the king resorted to an alternative method: cloning. Most of them died out, and we can actually find their bodies in-game. As Fretia's condition worsened, she was imprisoned in the deepest layer of the Verboten domain, the Abyss. There, she gradually transformed into the Blighted Lord, bringing the reign of death upon her former home. All of that happens before the game actually starts, and while that's cool and all, the part I appreciated more was the character writing they managed to put in here. It gives much needed depth to the setting and amps up the tragic tone of the game. There are notes about Silva regretting not being there for her sister. We read about Hoenir taking in Julius, future knight captain and illegitimate son of the king, against the code of the group he was born into, because his sister, Julius' mother, entrusted the baby to him. Wow, he was actually a pretty noble guy for someone with such a shit body. We read about one of Phaedon's mages getting pretty excited about the prospect of playing God. We see Ulf lamenting his now miserable existence in his undead body, finding respite in the company of Fretia. The flowers in the field they talked in are the same kind as the ones in his arena. Fretia herself writes about her insecurities and belief that being the White Priestess was the only reason why anyone kept her around, to be discarded once she outlived her usefulness. She was right. And speaking of her, she's involved in every one of the endings. There are 3 endings, A, B, and C, and I like all of them. Ending A is generally regarded as the neutral ending. To get it, you go to an area at the far east side of the map and purify yourself. In doing so, Lily passes out and sees a vision from Fretia telling her that the blight isn't her responsibility and that she should go live her own life. Parting ways with the Umbral Knight, Lily leaves Land's End. As a child that recently woke up from a coma and never talks, Lily's actual character is left fairly ambiguous, but we can't assume that the three endings all play into some facet of her personality. In Ending A, you take the normal way out, the way of a lost child who just wants out of a responsibility unfairly forced on her. No one would blame her for making this choice, but as the ending text says, she stopped nothing. Ending B can be seen as the bad ending. To get it, you have to kill the Blighted Lord. By taking on the blight inside it, Lily and Fretia suffer together forever, containing the blight within themselves. In Ending B, you take the way of a child unwilling to leave the last remains of her family, deeming it more important than her own freedom. If Fretia must suffer, then they will do it together. And despite her guilt and belief that Lily doesn't deserve to end up with her, the ending text tells us that she takes some solace in her company. Ending C is the true ending. You can tell because it's the only one of the three that requires collectibles. To get it, you need to find 7 stone tablets to get the Aegis Curio. If you wear it and then fight the Blighted Lord, it gets another phase. This ending starts like Ending B, but the Aegis Curio protects Lily from the blight. This time, it's actually purified, freeing Land's End along with both her and Fretia. Lily is able to give each of the clones a proper burial and is free to move on without regrets. Only in this ending is she able to break the cycle and become more than what she was meant to be. These endings all work for me because they're very consistent with how the game sets up Lily as a protagonist, as in it makes sense for all of them to happen. They also play nicely into Fretia's character. Before being trapped in the Abyss, she was someone who tied her own self-worth with her ability as the White Priestess, and when the clones were sacrificed to prolong her ability to do that, she may have thought that she deserved whatever she got. But at the same time, she wanted to be with them again, the ones who were with her at her most vulnerable time. Whether you actually purify the blight or not, she's glad to have Lily by her side again. And in the true ending, she can be free from that guilt and the curse she was born with. It's a pretty good emotional payoff for someone who has no presence throughout most of the game, but it does want you to read the notes to understand the way things went before the Reign of Death. Hey, I'm just recording this later because I forgot to add it. The credits song for this game, called Bulbel, it outlines Fretia's arc pretty clearly. It's very clearly from her point of view. It pretty much outlines her guilt and inner conflict pretty plainly. You can honestly get a pretty good idea of her character just by reading the lyrics to that song. One of the cool things about melee songs in games and other stuff is how the lyrics generally tie into the story, and this is another case of that. Yeah. In the space of game reviews, it's pretty common to find the conclusion that the reviewer has complicated feelings for the game they're talking about. Talking about that impression typically makes for a more compelling video. Ender Lilies is not one of those games for me, and this video is not very compelling. This game is a very solid 7 out of 10. It's just one that stuck in my mind long after I finished it for the things it does really well. It's beautiful, it's tragic, it's got weak sound design and this weird fuck-ass map. And as funny as it is to compare it to Hollow Knight, after playing them both, neither really took away from the other. Originality is overrated as long as you do what you're doing well enough. Hollow Knight obviously isn't the only thing this game might have been inspired by, but it doesn't really matter to me. You may not be the best, Ender Lilies, but you're beautiful in your own way.